Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Scholar. Tonight's journey takes us beyond the comforting horizon of our home planet, drifting into the velvet darkness of space to the silent, silver world of the moon. For as long as humanity has looked upward, the moon has been our most constant companion in the vast expanse of the night sky, a glowing sentinel that changes its face with a rhythm as old as time itself. It has watched over the rise and fall of great civilizations, its pale light touching the faces of our distant ancestors, just as it touches ours tonight, serving as a silent keeper of Earth's deepest secrets and oldest stories. There is a profound stillness to be found in its presence, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a steady light waiting to guide us through the night, casting long, gentle shadows that turn familiar landscapes into dreamscapes. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps other curious minds find a place to rest. But for now, get comfortable. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let's begin. The moon was likely born from a massive ancient collision between the young Earth and a Mars-sized wanderer that astronomers have named Theia. In the very distant past, long before the first oceans had fully settled on our world, the solar system was a much more crowded and chaotic place, filled with wayward planetary bodies seeking their own paths around the young sun. When these two great spheres met in the dark, it was not an end, but a spectacular beginning that would forever alter the destiny of our planet. The incredible energy of this ancient meeting threw vast clouds of molten rock and debris out into the void, forming a glowing ring around our infant Earth that, for a brief cosmic moment, may have rivaled the beauty of Saturn. Over time, gravity, the patient and silent sculptor of the universe, gently gathered these scattered embers together, coalescing them into a single glowing sphere. It slowly cooled from a fierce, molten red to the quiet, reflective grey we know today, a peaceful companion forged from the fires of Earth's own violent youth, now destined to watch over us for billions of years. We only ever see one face of the moon because it is tidally locked to our planet in a perpetual synchronized dance that has lasted for eons. When you look up at the night sky, you are seeing the same large craters, valleys, and ancient lava seas that your distant ancestors saw thousands of years ago, frozen in the same relative positions. This is not because the moon is still, but because its rotation has perfectly harmonized with its orbit around Earth. It spins once on its own axis for every single trip it takes around us. Long ago, Earth's gravity tugged unevenly on the moon's rocky body, acting like a gentle brake that slowly drained its rotational energy until it settled into this comfortable equilibrium. It now keeps one hemisphere constantly turned towards us, like an attentive partner in a never-ending waltz, while the far side remains permanently out of view from Earth, a private face that it shows only to the deep, star-filled expanse of space. The dark, distinct patches we see on the lunar surface are not actual seas as ancient astronomers once believed, but vast, solidified plains of ancient basaltic lava known as Maria. To early observers gazing up without telescopes, these smooth, dark areas look like tranquil oceans of water that might harbor strange new worlds and civilizations on their shores. In reality, they are the quiet aftermath of a geologically active youth, formed when massive asteroids struck the infant moon and cracked its thin crust, allowing molten rock from deep within its mantle to well up and flood the gigantic impact basins. These immense lava flows eventually cooled and hardened into dark, flat expanses of rock that have remained virtually unchanged for billions of years. They now stand as silent, frozen monuments to a fiery past, seas that will never know the rush of a tide or the touch of a breeze, forever calm beneath the vacuum of space. The moon is not entirely geologically dead, as it still experiences deep, gentle tremors known to scientists as moonquakes. While it may look like a perfectly still painting hanging in our sky, the moon is still responding to its environment in subtle, almost imperceptible ways that hint at a faint internal life. Unlike earthquakes on our own planet, which are often caused by the grinding of tectonic plates, many moonquakes are caused by the gravitational pull of the Earth itself, which squeezes and stretches the solid rock of the moon as it orbits us. These tidal stresses build up until the rock deep below the surface suddenly shifts, creating vibrations that can sometimes ring through the moon's rigid interior for long stretches of time, like a gently struck bell. It is a quiet, internal humming, a secret conversation between the Earth and its companion that only the most sensitive instruments can hear. Every single year, the moon slowly drifts about 1.5 inches farther away from Earth in its unending outward spiral. It might seem like it is fixed perfectly in the firmament, a steadfast guardian that always keeps its distance, but the invisible tether of gravity between us is slightly elastic. As the moon raises tides on Earth, the friction of huge volumes of water sloshing around our planet steals a tiny bit of Earth's rotational energy and transfers it to the moon, giving it a gentle outward push. This means that in the very distant past, our companion appeared much larger and more imposing in the prehistoric sky, looming over a younger Earth with a much more powerful presence. It is embarking on a very long, incredibly slow farewell, drifting deeper into the lonely ocean of space with infinite patience, though it will remain our companion for billions of years to come. While it appears to have absolutely no air at all, the moon actually possesses an incredibly thin, fragile atmosphere, technically known as an exosphere. To any human standing on its surface, it would feel like a perfect vacuum, utterly silent and devoid of the slightest breeze to stir the dust. However, there is a ghostly veil of gases, including helium, neon, and argon, with faint traces of elements such as sodium and potassium, that clings precariously to the surface, sourced from the solar wind and the slow release of gases from the lunar interior. These particles are so few and far between that they rarely collide with one another, instead hopping across the surface in long, lonely arcs before either escaping into space or settling back onto the dust. It is an atmosphere in name only, a faint whisper of substance that offers no protection from the harshness of space, existing as a delicate halo around the solid rock. The far side of the moon looks vastly different from the near side we know so well, being heavily battered by craters and almost entirely devoid of the dark lunar seas. Because it is always turned away from us, humanity had no idea what this hidden face looked like until the space age allowed robotic emissaries to circle around and send back the first grainy photographs. What they revealed was a rugged, chaotic highland terrain, scarred by countless impacts that had overlapped over billions of years, without the smooth, dark lava plains that make the near side so distinctive. Scientists believe the moon's crust is thicker on the far side, which made it much harder for ancient molten lava to break through to the surface, even when huge asteroids struck it. Over time, the moon as a whole has absorbed countless blows from space, and in its battered far side and gentler near side, we see the record of a small, faithful companion that has quietly taken many impacts in the shared history of Earth and Moon. The lunar surface is almost entirely covered in a fine, abrasive layer of charcoal grey dust, called regolith, that smells surprisingly like spent gunpowder to those who have touched it. From the safety of Earth, the Moon looks like a soft, luminous pearl, but the reality of its surface is much grittier and stranger than its gentle appearance suggests. Over billions of years, tiny micrometeorites have slammed into the lunar rocks at incredible speeds, pulverizing them into a powder of jagged, microscopic glass shards that have never been smoothed down by wind or water. When the Apollo astronauts returned to their lunar module and removed their helmets, they noticed the clinging dust gave off a distinct metallic scent, resembling fireworks or fireplace ashes. It is the scent of deep time and raw geology, a sensory memory of a world where rock is ground down not by gentle erosion, but by the harsh, unrelenting bombardment of the cosmos. Without wind or water to wear them away, the footprints left by astronauts and the ancient craters will remain virtually unchanged for millions of years. On Earth, our history is constantly being erased by the active forces of our living planet. Rain washes away tracks, winds erode mountains, and vegetation overgrows ruins. But on the Moon, there is a profound, almost eternal stillness that preserves many of the events that have happened on its surface with museum-like patience. The boot prints of the first humans to walk there look exactly as fresh in photographs today as they did the moment they were made decades ago, and they will likely remain recognizable long after the civilization that made them has evolved into something new. The Moon serves as a remarkably stable archive of solar system history, holding its memories with a permanence that we can scarcely comprehend. The Moon's silent gravitational pull is the primary conductor of Earth's ocean tides, lifting billions of tons of water effortlessly every single day. As our world spins beneath the Moon, the water in our vast oceans is tugged towards it, creating large bulges that travel across the globe, rising and falling against our coastlines with clockwork regularity. It is a mesmerizing display of action at a vast distance, a tangible connection between the celestial body above and the liquid world below. This rhythmic breathing of the oceans has shaped the evolution of life on our shores, creating unique tidal ecosystems that exist in the space between land and sea. It is a gentle, daily reminder that we are part of a larger cosmic system, our planet's very pulse synced to the silent orbit of its silver companion. Temperatures on the Moon swing wildly between blistering heat and freezing cold because there is no thick atmosphere to trap or distribute the sun's warmth. On Earth, our comfortable blanket of air moderates the temperature, keeping the nights relatively warm even when the sun is gone. But on the airless Moon, there is no such protection. When sunlight hits the surface, it can bake the rock to temperatures hotter than boiling water. Conversely, the moment you step into a deep shadow, or when night falls, a night that lasts for around 2 Earth weeks, the temperature plummets to hundreds of degrees below zero. It is a world of extreme, unforgiving contrasts, where blistering daylight and unimaginably deep, freezing darkness exist side by side, separated only by the sharp, unbroken line of a shadow. Although it has no global magnetic field today, ancient rocks brought back by astronauts suggest the Moon once had a surprisingly strong magnetic field shield, with field strengths at times comparable to Earth's. Billions of years ago, when the Moon was young and its interior was still hot and molten, it likely had a churning metallic core that acted as a dynamo, generating a protective magnetic bubble around itself. This ancient shield would have protected its surface from the harsh solar wind during its earliest days, perhaps when it was still geologically active and forming its great lava seas. Over eons, as its small core cooled and solidified, the dynamo slowed and eventually stopped completely, causing the magnetic field to wither away. Now, only faint, ghostly traces of that lost magnetism remain locked inside the oldest lunar rocks, frozen memories of a time when the moon had a beating heart of its own. Deep within the permanently shadowed craters at the lunar poles, hidden reservoirs of water ice have rested largely untouched for potentially billions of years. While most of the moon is drier than the driest desert on Earth, baked by relentless sunlight, there are deep pockets near the north and south poles where sunlight never reaches the crater floors. In these regions of eternal darkness, temperatures remain unimaginably cold, acting as cold traps that can capture any wandering water molecules that drift in from comet impacts, asteroids, or solar wind interactions with the soil. Once a water molecule lands in these shadows, it freezes and can remain there for immense stretches of time, accumulating into significant deposits of ice. These are the secret frozen oases of the moon, waiting silently in the dark for future explorers to discover their ancient, pristine secrets. When the moon is close to the horizon, it often appears amazingly larger to our eyes than when it is high in the sky, a persistent trick of the human mind known as the moon illusion. You have likely stood in awe of a massive golden harvest moon rising above distant trees or city buildings, seemingly close enough to touch. Yet, if you were to measure it, you would find it is exactly the same size on the horizon as it is when it is high overhead. It is not an atmospheric magnification, but a psychological one. Our brains, when seeing the moon next to familiar earthly objects on the horizon, interpret it as being vastly larger than when it is floating alone in the immense, empty void overhead. It is a shared human experience of wonder that exists entirely within our own perception, a beautiful deception that makes the connection between Earth and Moon feel even more intimate. To keep the same face toward Earth, the Moon must spin on its axis at the exact same slow rate it takes to orbit our planet. It is a common misconception that the Moon does not rotate because we always see the same features. If it truly didn't rotate, we would gradually see every side as it moved along its path around us. Instead, it turns with incredible slowness and precision, completing one full rotation every 27 days or so, relative to the stars. This perfect synchronization means that as it moves a little bit along its curved path around Earth, it turns just enough to keep its gaze fixed upon us. It is a graceful, unending pirouette that has been performed without fail for millions of years. A testament to the elegant and predictable laws of physics that govern the grand ballet of celestial bodies. During a thin crescent moon, you can sometimes see the rest of the dark lunar disk, faintly illuminated by a ghostly, ashen glow, known as earthshine. This beautiful phenomenon, sometimes poetically called the old moon in the new moon's arms, occurs when sunlight reflects off the bright clouds, ice, and oceans of Earth, travels all the way to the moon, and then reflects back to our eyes. It is a dim, secondary light, a mirror image of our own planet's brilliance, cast onto the dark lunar night. If you were standing on the moon during this time, you would see a nearly full Earth hanging in the sky, shining dozens of times brighter than the full moon does for us, bathing the lunar landscape in a soft, eerie blue light. Earthshine is a gentle whisper of light from our own home, returned to us by our faithful neighbor. The lunar soil has absorbed vast quantities of helium-3 from the solar wind over billions of years, a rare isotope that is incredibly scarce on Earth. Our planet is protected by a strong magnetic field that deflects most of the electrically charged particles streaming from the sun, preventing them from reaching the ground. The moon, having no such global shield, has been bathed in this solar stream for eons, and its dusty regolith has soaked up these particles like a giant cosmic sponge. Scientists dream that this trapped helium-3 could one day be used as a clean, powerful fuel for future fusion reactors, offering a possible energy source that would produce far less long-lived radioactive waste than many current nuclear technologies. For now, it remains a theoretical promise, a silent treasure trove of starlight energy resting in the grey dust, waiting patiently for humanity to decide whether and how to harness its sleeping power. Humanity's tendency to see faces, rabbits, or other familiar figures in the moon's random craters and seas is a psychological phenomenon shared across countless cultures. For as long as we have been a species, we have looked up at the bright, mottled disk in the night sky and found comforting patterns in its chaotic geography. This tendency, called pareidolia, is our brain's way of trying to make sense of random visual data, finding the familiar in the unfamiliar vastness of nature. Whether one sees a man carrying a bundle of sticks, a jade rabbit pounding medicine, or a toad, these shared cultural visions have connected us to the cosmos through stories and myths for thousands of years. The moon has always served as a blank canvas for the human imagination, reflecting not just the light of the sun, but the deepest stories and dreams of the people watching it from below. Beneath some of the moon's large impact basins lie mysterious, massive concentrations of dense material that create stronger gravitational pull in specific spots. These anomalies, known as mascons, short for mass concentrations, were first discovered when early lunar orbiters were unexpectedly pulled slightly off course and sped up as they passed over certain lunar seas. Scientists believe these are areas where huge asteroids punched deep into the moon's interior, and the resulting craters were later filled with unusually dense, heavy materials, including mantle rocks and thick lava flows that solidified into hidden subterranean weights. They are like heavy, invisible ghosts of ancient violence, buried deep beneath the now calm surface, silently tugging at anything that passes too close to them. It is a reminder that even an airless world can have hidden depths and unseen forces waiting below its placid exterior. While it glows brilliantly white in our night sky, the actual surface of the moon is surprisingly dark, similar in color to worn asphalt or a charcoal chalkboard. We perceive it as a shining silvery beacon only because it is usually the brightest object in the night sky, contrasted sharply against the velvet blackness of surrounding space. In reality, the lunar regolith reflects only about 12% of the sunlight that hits it, absorbing the rest into its dark, dusty grains. If you were to place a typical Earth rock next to a piece of the moon under the same light, the moon rock would appear remarkably dark and dull. It is a humble charcoal grey world that is transformed into a luminous lantern only through the generous gift of the sun's distant light, reminding us that context is everything in how we perceive beauty. As the moon slowly cools from its ancient fiery formation, it is very gently shrinking in upon itself, like a ripening piece of fruit drying in the sun. Over the last several 100 million years, the interior of our companion has been gradually losing its primordial heat to the cold vacuum of space, causing the entire sphere to contract by roughly 150 feet in overall size. Because the moon's outer crust is cold, brittle, and unyielding, it cannot simply shrink smoothly. Instead, it breaks and buckles under the immense internal pressure, creating long, winding cliffs known as lobate scarps that can stretch for dozens of miles across the landscape. These are the wrinkles of an aging world, evidence that even seemingly quiet celestial bodies are still settling into their final forms over incredibly vast stretches of time. It is not a violent process, but a slow geologic sigh, a quiet adjustment to the endless march of eons as the moon settles deeper into its long, frozen slumber. The countless craters that pockmark the lunar surface are the preserved scars of a bombardment that happened when the solar system was still young and chaotic. Billions of years ago, the space between the newly formed planets was filled with wayward debris, leftover bricks from the construction of our cosmic neighborhood that rained down upon every solid surface in their path. On Earth, wind, rain, and the shifting of tectonic plates have erased most of these ancient impact sites, smoothing over the evidence of our violent past. But the moon, having no such active processes to heal its wounds, keeps many of its craters intact, from microscopic pits to vast basins thousands of miles wide. It wears its history openly on its face, a silent, unchanging museum that has recorded countless stray wanderers crossing its path since the very dawn of our solar system. One of the most spectacular features visible from Earth is Tycho, a relatively young crater that has splashed bright rays of ejected material across nearly the entire lunar disk. Formed roughly 100 million years ago, a mere blink of an eye in geologic time, back when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth, this impact was so powerful that it sent glowing white pulverized rock flying outward in every direction for thousands of miles. These long, luminous fingers of debris still drape over older craters and darker lava seas, radiating from Tycho like the spokes of a great glittering wheel. Because it is so young, the material hasn't yet darkened much from exposure to space, making it shine brilliantly during a full moon, a stark, beautiful reminder of the grand energies that occasionally reshape the heavens. A single day on the moon, from one sunrise to the next, lasts for about 29.5 Earth days. If you were to build a home on the lunar surface, you would experience roughly 2 weeks of unrelenting, brilliant sunshine, followed by 2 weeks of profound, uninterrupted darkness. The sun would appear to crawl across the black sky with agonizing slowness, taking over an hour just to fully creep above the horizon at dawn. This extreme length of day is a direct consequence of its tidal locking with Earth. Its slow rotation means that the rhythm of life we know, the quick cycle of waking and sleeping, is stretched into a marathon of light and shadow. It is a world where time seems to almost stand still, where noon hangs in the sky for days on end, and the long lunar night offers ample time for the stars to wheel slowly overhead. Because there is no atmosphere to scatter sunlight, the shadows on the moon are incredibly dark and razor sharp. On Earth, even when you stand in the shade of a tree or a tall building, you can still see clearly because molecules in the air bounce sunlight into the shadowed areas, filling them with a soft ambient glow. On the airless moon, however, there is no such scattering. Stepping into a shadow is like stepping directly into an almost perfect night, with very little transition between the blazing light and the inky blackness. The line between day and night, called the terminator, is a stark boundary where tall mountain peaks can be brilliantly illuminated, while their bases are lost in darkness. It creates a high contrast landscape of dazzling highs and abyssal lows, a place of visual absolutes unmatched by the softer, diffused light of our home world. Occasionally, we are treated to a blue moon, which is not actually blue in color, but is commonly defined today as the second full moon occurring within a single calendar month. Because the lunar cycle is roughly 29.5 days long, it doesn't sync perfectly with our months, which typically have 30 or 31 days. Every 2 or 3 years, the calendar drifts just enough for a single month to capture 2 full moons, a quiet quirk of celestial record keeping that we have marked with this poetic name. It serves as a gentle reminder that our human attempts to measure and box up time into neat little squares on a calendar will always be slightly out of step with the true ancient rhythms of the natural orbits above us. It is a rare and special extra dose of moonlight, a bonus gift from the cosmos to brighten our night skies. The harvest moon is the full moon closest to the autumn equinox, famed for providing several nights of bright moonlight right when farmers traditionally needed it most. Usually, the moon rises about 50 minutes later each night, but due to the shallow angle of its orbit relative to the horizon during early autumn, it rises only about 20 or 30 minutes later for several evenings in a row. In the days before electricity, this fortunate celestial alignment gave harvesters several extra hours of welcome light after the sun had set, helping them bring in their crops before the winter chill arrived. It appeared as a giant, benevolent, pumpkin-colored lantern hanging low in the eastern sky, a partner to humanity's oldest agricultural labors, seemingly arriving exactly when it was needed most, to help us prepare for the coming rest of winter. A total solar eclipse is a cosmic coincidence of remarkable precision, where the moon appears to perfectly cover the vast face of the sun. The sun is roughly 400 times larger than the moon, but it also happens to be roughly 400 times farther away from Earth, making them appear almost exactly the same size in our sky. When they align just right, the moon's dark silhouette fits over the sun like a tailored lens cap, blocking out the blinding glare and allowing the sun's ghostly, wispy outer atmosphere, the corona, to become visible to the naked eye. It is a spectacular, fleeting alignment that may be uncommon on worlds elsewhere, though we cannot yet know how rare it is beyond our own system. For a few precious minutes, the smallest of companions briefly obscures the mightiest of stars, turning day into a strange twilight dream. During a total lunar eclipse, the moon does not disappear completely, but instead turns a deep, coppery red, often called a blood moon. This dramatic transformation happens when Earth passes directly between the sun and the moon, casting its immense shadow across the lunar surface. While direct sunlight is blocked, Earth's atmosphere acts like a lens, bending and filtering some sunlight around the edges of our planet. The blue light is scattered away, but the longer red wavelengths make it through, effectively projecting every sunrise and sunset on Earth onto the face of the moon at once. It hangs in the sky like a glowing ember, bathed in the collective twilight of our own world, a beautiful and eerie reflection of the light that has just grazed the edges of humanity's home. Scattered across certain parts of the lunar surface are strange, bright, swirling patterns that have puzzled astronomers for centuries. These lunar swirls, which look like abstract paintings of bright cream stirred into dark coffee, have absolutely no topographic relief. They are painted flatly onto the regolith, unaffected by craters or hills. Scientists now believe they are protected by tiny magnetic bubbles that deflect the solar wind, preventing those specific patches of soil from being darkened by space weathering like the surrounding terrain. They are like natural sunscreen for the lunar surface, preserving the original brighter color of the youthful moon in beautiful ghostly ribbons that wind silently across the dark lava plains, mysterious hieroglyphs written by ancient magnetism. Hidden beneath the placid grey surface are gigantic lava tubes, vast cavernous tunnels left over from ancient volcanic eruptions that could be large enough to house entire cities. Billions of years ago, when rivers of molten basalt flowed across the moon, the top layers would cool and harden into a solid roof, while the hot lava underneath continued to flow, eventually draining away to leave an empty, hardened pipe. Because of the moon's lower gravity, these tubes can be much wider than any found on Earth, stable, protected voids that have sat in total darkness and silence for eons. They are waiting there now, massive, empty cathedrals of undisturbed rock, natural shelters that might one day provide safe, radiation-shielded harbors for future explorers seeking refuge from the harsh surface above. The samples brought back by Apollo astronauts revealed a striking geochemical similarity between Earth and Moon, particularly in their oxygen isotopes. Every celestial body in the solar system normally has a unique isotopic fingerprint based on where it formed in the primordial solar nebula, but the Moon and Earth are virtually identical twins in this regard. This deep chemical kinship is some of the strongest evidence that they were forged from the same source material in that primordial collision with Theia, rather than the Moon being a stranger captured by Earth's gravity later on. We are truly made of the same stuff, two siblings born from the same chaotic cradle, forever bound not just by gravity, but by the very atoms that make up our respective worlds. The far side of the Moon hosts one of the largest known impact craters in the entire solar system, the immense South Pole Aitken Basin. This colossal depression is roughly 1,500 miles across and up to about 8 miles deep, a hole so vast it could easily swallow the western half of the United States. It was likely formed by a titanic asteroid that struck the young moon at an oblique angle, excavating deep into its mantle, but surprisingly not breaking it entirely apart. It remains today as a gigantic shadowed bowl near the lunar South Pole, a silent testament to the unimaginable scales of violence that shaped the early days of our now peaceful neighborhood, hidden from direct view on the hemisphere that faces the deep dark. While the moon is bone dry on its sunlit surface today, billions of years ago it may briefly have possessed a thicker atmosphere and even transient pools or films of liquid water. During its period of peak volcanic activity, massive eruptions would have spewed vast amounts of gases like water vapor and carbon monoxide out from the interior faster than they could escape into space, forming a temporary atmosphere thicker than Mars has now. For a relatively short geological interval, perhaps a few tens of millions of years, parts of the surface may have had enough pressure and the right temperatures for liquid water to persist in some locations before it was lost to the void or trapped as ice. This remains a scientific hypothesis rather than a proven chapter of lunar history, and researchers are still carefully gathering evidence to understand just how wet and for how long our desolate grey companion might once have been. Some ancient lunar rocks are classified by a delightful acronym known as CREEP, marking them as geochemically unique treasures. The name stands for potassium, rare earth elements, and phosphorus, components that were unexpectedly abundant in certain samples. These rocks are believed to represent the very last dregs of the ancient magma ocean that once covered the entire moon. As the vast sea of molten rock cooled and crystallized into solid crust, these specific elements, which didn't fit neatly into typical mineral crystals, were concentrated into the final remaining pockets of liquid. They are the geochemical backwash of a cooling world, highly radioactive and complex leftovers that tell us the intricate story of how an entire planet-sized body freezes solid over millions of years. For centuries, reliable observers have reported strange, fleeting flashes of light or localized color on the moon, known as transient lunar phenomena. These might appear as brief reddish glows, mysterious hazes that obscure craters for a few hours, or sudden star-like sparkles that vanish as quickly as they appear. While many were likely optical illusions or tricks of Earth's own turbulent atmosphere, some may be genuine events caused by pockets of gas suddenly escaping from deep fissures, or fresh meteorite impacts striking the surface in real time. These reports are tantalizing hints that the moon is not quite as quiet as it seems, offering rare, fleeting winks of activity to those patient enough to watch its silent face for long stretches, even though the true nature of many of these events remains uncertain. The moon's steady presence has guided life on Earth for far longer than humanity has existed, acting as a celestial compass for countless creatures. Newly hatched sea turtles, emerging from their sandy nests at night, instinctively use the bright reflection of the moon on the ocean water and the glow along the seaward horizon to find their way safely to the sea. Tiny moths and dung beetles use the polarized light of the moon to maintain straight paths as they navigate across dark landscapes, locking onto its distant, steady glow as a reliable beacon. We are just one of many species that have evolved under its watchful silver eye, all of us connected by a shared reliance on the gentle light it provides in the darkness. Though we have visited it with robots and human explorers, there are still pristine mirrors on the moon that are actively used by scientists today. The Apollo astronauts and later Soviet robotic rovers left behind highly specialized retroreflector arrays, essentially sophisticated celestial bicycle reflectors facing Earth. Astronomers fire powerful laser pulses from observatories on the ground, bounce them off these distant mirrors, and time their return to measure the distance to the moon with incredible precision, down to just a few millimeters. It is one of the longest-running distance measurements in history, a continuous beam of coherent light connecting humanity to its companion, silently pinging back and forth through the darkness to keep track of our ever-drifting partner. The very word lunacy comes from the ancient belief that the moon's phases could exert a powerful, unsettling influence on the human mind. While modern science has found little convincing evidence to support the idea that full moons cause madness, the linguistic connection remains as a fossil of our deep psychological tether to the night sky. In a world before artificial light, a full moon would have dramatically altered the environment, turning a dangerous, pitch-black night into a brightly lit landscape suitable for hunting, traveling, or gathering. It is easy to understand how our ancestors, living entirely by the natural rhythms of the sky, felt that such a dramatic change in the nocturnal world must also tug at the hidden tides of their own spirits. If you were to stand on the moon, the sky would always be totally black, even when the sun is blazing high overhead. On Earth, our atmosphere scatters the short blue wavelengths of sunlight in every direction, creating the beautiful azure dome we see above us during the day. But without an atmosphere to scatter the light, the lunar sky remains a profound, endless void of star-studded velvet, with the incredibly bright sun hanging like a stark, unblinking spotlight in the darkness. It would be a surreal, high-contrast visual experience, a place where you could see the fierce furnace of our home star and the distant, cold lights of the rest of the galaxy, sharing the exact same sky at the exact same moment. Strange, ghostly glows sometimes appear on the lunar horizon, just before sunrise or just after sunset, believed to be caused by electrostatically charged dust levitating above the surface. In the utter vacuum of space, the harsh ultraviolet rays from the sun can knock electrons off the tiny grains of lunar dust, giving them a positive charge, electrical charge, that causes them to repel one another and lift silently off the ground. These microscopic particles can float kilometers into the black sky, creating enormous tenuous clouds that are completely invisible until they catch the slanted rays of the rising or setting sun. To an observer standing on the surface, it would look like a faint, eerie twilight shimmering in a world that should have no twilight at all, a phantom glow born entirely from the silent forces of static electricity dancing with the dust. Without the moon's steadying gravitational hand, Earth's axis of rotation might wobble far more chaotically over millions of years, with profound consequences for climate. Our planet spins at a tilt of about 23 degrees relative to its orbit, a fortunate angle that gives us our predictable seasons as we journey around the sun. The moon acts as a massive stabilizing anchor, its gravity helping to keep this tilt within a relatively modest range over vast stretches of geologic time. Computer models suggest that without this faithful companion holding us steady, Earth's tilt could wander much more wildly, occasionally shifting enough to turn tranquil temperate zones into blistering deserts or frozen wastes. It is the silent, unseen gyroscope of our world, helping safeguard the delicate climatic balance that has allowed complex life to flourish for so long. Under the right conditions, the light of a nearly full moon can create rare, ethereal nocturnal rainbows on Earth known as moonbows. These delicate phenomena are formed exactly like their daytime counterparts, by moonlight refracting through water droplets in the air, usually from misty waterfalls or gentle night rains. Because moonlight is so much fainter than sunlight, these lunar rainbows often appear ghostly white or silvery to the naked human eye, as our color vision struggles to work in such low light. However, they contain the full spectrum of colors, just like a solar rainbow, a secret band of color waiting in the darkness that can be revealed by a camera or the keenest of night-adapted eyes. One of the most precious treasures ever returned from the moon is the Genesis rock, a sample of the ancient lunar crust that is over 4 billion years old. Finding this rock was a primary goal of the Apollo missions, as scientists hoped to discover a piece of the original, primordial surface that had somehow survived billions of years of intense bombardment and melting. When astronauts finally stumbled upon this nondescript white, crystalline rock sitting atop a pedestal of lunar dust, they had found a virtual time capsule from the very birth of the solar system. It is a silent, frozen witness to the earliest, most chaotic chapter of our history, a small fragment of deep time that has rested unchanged while entire worlds evolved around it. Humanity's very first attempts to track the passage of time were almost certainly based on the reliable, changing face of the moon rather than the sun. Long before complex solar calendars were developed by great agricultural civilizations, our ancient ancestors etched tally marks into bones and cave walls, tracking the roughly 29-day cycle from one full moon to the next. The moon was the original celestial clock, a massive, easy-to-read timepiece hanging in the sky that allowed early humans to organize their lives, anticipate seasonal changes, and find a shared rhythm in the chaos of the natural world. Our modern concept of a month is a direct linguistic and cultural descendant of this ancient moon-based counting, a deep connection to the lunar cycle that is still embedded in the very way we measure our lives. The lunar surface serves as a quiet, undisturbed graveyard for dozens of robotic probes from Earth that have ended their missions there. Since the very dawn of the space age, we have intentionally crashed orbiters and landers into the grey dust once their fuel ran out or their tasks were complete, rather than letting them become dangerous drifting space junk. These metallic emissaries, which once beamed breathtaking images and precious data back to their creators, now rest silently in craters and on vast lava plains, slowly being sprinkled with an imperceptible rain of cosmic dust. They are among humanity's first permanent monuments on another world, silent technological fossils that will remain preserved for millions of years after their batteries have faded. Due to the moon's gravity being only about 1/6 that of Earth's, falling on the lunar surface is a strangely slow, almost dreamlike experience. If an astronaut were to trip over a rock, they wouldn't crash quickly to the ground as they would here. Instead, they would slowly drift downward in a gentle, arcing motion, giving them ample time to adjust and cushion their fall. This reduced gravity turns simple movements into a kind of slow-motion ballet, allowing heavy spacesuit-clad humans to perform effortless, kangaroo-like hops across the landscape. It is a world where the harsh, immediate consequences of gravity are softened, turning every step into a floaty, surreal performance in the silent vacuum. The phenomenon popularly called a supermoon occurs when a full moon coincides with its closest approach to Earth, known as perigee. Because the moon's orbit is not a perfect circle, but a slightly stretched out ellipse, its distance from us varies throughout the month by roughly 30,000 miles. When it is at its very closest point, it can appear roughly 14% larger and around 30% brighter than when it is at its farthest point, bathing the Earth in noticeably more nocturnal light. While the size difference can be subtle to the casual observer, the extra brilliance is often unmistakable, casting deeper, sharper shadows and turning familiar nighttime landscapes into brightly lit, silvery dreamscapes. Relative to the size of the planet it orbits, our moon is anomalously huge, making the Earth-Moon system almost unique in our solar system. While giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn have moons that are technically larger than ours, those moons are tiny specks compared to their massive gas giant hosts. Our moon is about a quarter of the diameter of Earth, a ratio so large that some astronomers have suggested we could almost think of them as a double planet rather than a planet and its moon. We are celestial partners of unusually equal standing, locked together in a dance where each partner significantly influences the other, rather than a giant master simply holding a tiny satellite captive. Without a thick atmosphere or a global magnetic field to protect it, the lunar surface is constantly bathed in intense, invisible radiation from deep space. Galactic cosmic rays, particles traveling at nearly the speed of light from distant supernova explosions, slam into the lunar regolith day and night, slowly altering its chemical composition over millions of years. This relentless silent rain of energy means that any future human habitats will need to be buried underground or covered in thick layers of protective shielding to be safe. It is a stark reminder of how rare and precious our own protective blue sky truly is, acting as a fragile shield against the harsh, sterilizing energies that fill the wider universe. Recent discoveries have found that billions of tons of water might be locked away across the entire lunar surface, hidden inside tiny, microscopic glass beads. These minute beads are formed instantly when small meteorites strike the lunar soil, melting the rock in a flash of heat that quickly cools into glass, trapping tiny amounts of water molecules inside them, like miniature time capsules. While each bead contains only a minuscule whisper of moisture, there are so many trillions of them scattered across the dusty plains that together they represent a vast, planet-wide reservoir. It is a secret ocean hidden in plain sight, stored in glittering microscopic vaults that have been waiting in the dust for eons. Scattered across the earth are hundreds of moon trees, grown from seeds that were taken into orbit around the moon by Apollo 14 astronauts. These seeds, ranging from majestic redwoods to sturdy sycamores, circled our celestial companion dozens of times in zero gravity before being brought back and planted in various locations around our planet. They now stand tall and silent in parks, universities, and government buildings, outwardly identical to any other tree, but possessing a quiet, otherworldly heritage. They are living, breathing connections between two worlds, earthly life that has touched the emptiness of deep space and returned to sink its roots back into familiar soil. If a massive asteroid were to strike the moon tomorrow, even one the size of a city, it would make absolutely no sound whatsoever to an observer standing nearby. Sound requires a medium like air or water to travel through, vibrating molecules to carry the noise to our ears. In the near-perfect vacuum of the lunar surface, there is nothing to carry these waves, meaning that even the most violent, catastrophic events would unfold in total, eerie silence. Giant plumes of pulverized rock would explode upward, and mountains would crumble, without so much as a whisper. A strange, silent display of pure kinetic energy that defies our earthbound expectations of noise and impact. Before humans first walked on the moon, there was a genuine, though small, fear that they might bring back dangerous lunar germs that could harm life on Earth. To prevent any potential biological catastrophe, the first astronauts to return from the moon were immediately placed inside a specialized quarantine facility for 3 weeks, along with their spacecraft and moon rocks. They had to gaze out at the world they had just seen from space through thick glass windows, waiting to see if any alien contagions would manifest. It was a humble admission of our own ignorance, a necessary pause to ensure that our grandest voyage of exploration didn't accidentally become our final one. There are unique points in space near the moon where the gravitational pull of the Earth and the moon, combined with the centrifugal effects of their orbital dance, balance out to create relatively stable parking spots known as Lagrange points. Objects placed in these invisible gravitational valleys can remain there for long periods with minimal effort, balanced delicately between the two massive celestial bodies. These quiet, stable zones in the nothingness of space are considered prime real estate for future space stations or observatories, acting as gateways or stepping stones where we can rest before venturing further into the dark. They are natural harbors in the endless ocean of vacuum, created by the elegant interplay of gravity. The sheer age of lunar craters is almost incomprehensible compared to the constantly changing surface of our own active planet. A fresh-looking crater on the moon with sharp, well-defined rims might easily be hundreds of millions of years old. predating the rise of mammals on Earth. Because there is almost nothing to erode them away, features that look as though they formed yesterday could have been created when strange, prehistoric sea creatures were the only complex life forms on our world. The moon is a place where time is measured not in years or centuries, but in eons. And the landscape you see tonight is virtually identical to the one that looked down on the dinosaurs. The 6 American flags planted by Apollo astronauts on the lunar surface have likely been bleached almost pure white by decades of harsh, unfiltered solar radiation. While they stand perfectly still in the airless environment, never fluttering once since the moment they were planted, the intense ultraviolet light from the sun has almost certainly broken down the red and blue dyes in the fabric long ago. To a modern visitor, they would appear as ghostly, pale markers on the grey plains, accidental monuments of peace rather than symbols of rivalry. It is a poetic, unintended surrender to the overwhelming power of the cosmos, turning bold banners of national pride into quiet white flags resting under an unchanging sky. While Western cultures often see a man in the moon, many East Asian cultures have looked up for thousands of years and seen a rabbit pounding a mortar and pestle. In these beautiful ancient legends, the rabbit is a selfless companion of a moon goddess, forever working to create the elixir of immortality in its palace of jade. This shared instance of lunar pareidolia, seeing different shapes in the same dark seas, highlights how the moon acts as a cultural mirror for humanity. We all look at the exact same pattern of craters and ancient lava flows, but we see the stories that matter most to our own diverse civilizations reflected back at us. Some of the most dramatic features on the moon are immense, winding valleys known as rilles, which can look like giant, dry riverbeds meandering across the desolate plains. One of the most famous, Hadley Rel, is a staggering chasm over 80 miles long and up to 1,000 feet deep, a grand canyon carved into a smaller world. These channels were not carved by flowing water, but are likely immense lava pathways that carried torrents of molten rock billions of years ago, or collapsed lava tubes of colossal scale. They are scars of a fiery past, deep wrinkles in the moon's now frozen skin that hint at the unimaginable volumes of molten rock that once poured across its surface. In Earth's very early history, billions of years ago when the moon orbited much closer to our planet, its powerful tidal drag caused Earth to spin significantly faster, resulting in far shorter days than we know now. Not long after the moon formed, a single day on Earth may have lasted only about 6 hours, with the sun racing from horizon to horizon in what would feel like a hurried blur compared to today. Over deep geologic time, the friction of the tides, 2 massive bulges of water constantly being dragged around the globe by the moon, acted like a brake on Earth's rotation, gradually slowing us down to our current 24-hour rhythm. The very pace of our lives, the fundamental rhythm of day and night that governs every living thing on Earth, has been stretched and shaped by the patient, unrelenting pull of our silent companion in the sky. Although it is tidally locked to Earth, the moon gently wobbles over time in a complex motion known as libration, allowing patient observers to peek slightly around its edges. While it does complete 1 rotation for every orbit, its elliptical path means its orbital speed changes slightly, while its rotation remains constant, sometimes causing it to get a little ahead of or behind its majestic turning schedule. Furthermore, its axis is tilted ever so slightly relative to its orbit, allowing us to occasionally see over its north or south poles during different parts of its monthly journey. Because of this slow, rhythmic nodding and gentle shaking of its head, over the course of time, we can actually see about 59% of the total lunar surface from Earth, rather than just exactly half. It is like a shy companion that mostly keeps its face fixed toward us, but occasionally, in quiet moments, reveals just a little more of its hidden self to those who watch closely enough. The lunar surface is in a state of constant, infinitesimally slow turmoil known to scientists by the surprisingly gentle term gardening. While it appears perfectly still to human eyes, the upper layers of the grey regolith are being continually churned and overturned by the relentless microscopic bombardment of tiny meteorites from deep space. Over millions of years, this ceaseless rain of high-speed dust particles acts like an invisible, slow-motion plough, burying older surface materials and bringing ancient, deeper layers up to face the vacuum once more. It is a geological process that happens on timescales we can barely comprehend, a very slow boiling of the solid rock that ensures the very skin of the moon is never truly static, but always slowly breathing and changing over the darkest eons of time. The far side of the moon is arguably one of the quietest places in the entire inner solar system for radio astronomers, a sanctuary of almost perfect terrestrial silence. On Earth, our skies are fiercely noisy, filled with the constant electromagnetic chatter of television broadcasts, GPS signals, cell phone data, and radar that drowns out the faint whispers of the deep cosmos. But thanks to the moon's immense rocky bulk blocking Earth from view, the far side is completely shielded from most of this incessant human noise, creating a pristine radio dark zone of unparalleled quiet. Future telescopes built in this silent region could listen to incredibly faint signals from the very dawn of the universe, ancient whispers that have been traveling for more than 13 billion years, finally able to be heard in the profound stillness of the lunar shadow. If you stood on the near side of the moon, the Earth would never rise or set, but would hang eternally fixed in roughly the same spot in the black sky. Because the same side of the moon always faces us, our planet would appear as a massive, virtually unmoving sentinel, slowly spinning on its own axis and going through its own spectacular phases from thin crescent to brilliant full Earth every month. You could navigate the endless grey plains for hundreds of miles and still see your home world hanging in nearly the same place, a comforting, unwavering blue and white marble watching over your journey. It serves as an eternal, unblinking eye in the heavens for any traveller on the lunar surface, a constant reminder of where they came from in the vast, disorienting emptiness of space. When the moon reaches its absolute fullest phase, it experiences a sudden, noticeable spike in brightness, known to astronomers as the opposition surge. For several nights leading up to the full moon, it brightens gradually, but in the final hours, when it is perfectly opposite the sun in our sky, its brilliance jumps more than would be expected from the tiny extra bit of illuminated surface area alone. This happens because all the tiny shadows cast by grains of dust and small rocks on the lunar surface disappear directly behind the objects casting them, and the unique structure of the lunar soil reflects more light almost straight back toward the source, like millions of microscopic retroreflectors. It is a fleeting moment of perfect celestial alignment, a brief flash of maximum brilliance before the shadows slowly begin to creep back across the landscape. Unlike the smooth, rounded grains of sand found on Earth's beaches, lunar dust particles are viciously sharp and jagged shards of glass-rich rock. On our home planet, The gentle, ceaseless action of wind and water tumble sand grains against each other for ages, polishing down their rough edges into soft, tiny spheres that feel pleasant to the touch. But on the airless, dry moon, there is no such weathering process to smooth them down. They remain as razor-edged as the moment they were forged by violent meteorite impacts billions of years ago. This incredibly abrasive powder tore at the outer layers of astronauts' maze, spacesuits, and irritated their throats when tracked back into the lunar lander. A harsh, gritty reality hidden behind the moon's soft, silvery appearance in our sky. In a small, sealed biosphere on the lunar far side, humanity managed to briefly grow the first fragile sprout of a plant on another world in 2019. The Chinese Chang'e 4 lander carried a tiny, self-contained habitat filled with air, water, and soil to see if terrestrial life could endure the alien environment of the moon's surface. For a few precious days, a single cotton seed broke open and sent a tiny green shoot upwards, a brave little pioneer of life in a totally dead world, before the brutal, plunging temperatures of the 2-week-long lunar night finally froze it. It remains there now, only in memory and data, a fleeting, poetic symbol of life's tenacious urge to reach out into the void, a tiny, frozen leaf that once unfurled on a barren celestial body. The moon once possessed a fiery, churning interior that generated a global magnetic field much like a scaled-down version of Earth's, though it has long since faded away. Billions of years ago, when the moon was young and his heart was still hot and molten, this internal dynamo created an invisible shield that protected its surface from much of the harsh stripping of the solar wind. As the small world cooled down over endless eons, its core slowly solidified. The dynamo chugged to a halt, and its protective magnetic shield withered and died, leaving only patchy, localized magnetic remnants frozen into ancient rocks. It is a poignant reminder of the life cycle of celestial bodies, a transition from the vibrant, fiery energy of youth to the quiet, frozen stillness of geologic maturity. The geography of the moon acts as a silent, enduring hall of fame, with many of its greatest craters bearing the names of Earth's most patient observers from history. When early astronomers first began mapping the strange new world through their telescopes, they chose to immortalize great philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians: Plato, Copernicus, Archimedes, Tycho, by assigning their names to the vast features they studied. These grand intellectual figures, who spent their lives gazing upward in wonder, now have their names permanently etched into the very landscape of the heavens. They rest eternally in the silent dust, elevated far above the noise of history, keeping watch over the cosmos they loved from monumental airless pedestals. The line between day and night on the moon, called the terminator, moves across the surface at roughly 10 miles per hour, a leisurely pace that a determined human could outpace on a bicycle. On Earth, this same line races across the equator at over 1,000 miles per hour, bringing dawn and dusk in a matter of fleeting minutes. But because the moon spins so incredibly slowly, taking an entire month to turn once, the sunrise is a drawn-out, languid affair that takes many hours to fully illuminate a single mountain range. An astronaut with enough stamina could theoretically jog westward and keep pace with the setting sun, staying comfortably bathed in perpetual late afternoon light for as long as they could keep moving, always just ahead of the encroaching night. Deep, shadowed pits have been discovered on the lunar surface that are actually skylights opening into vast subterranean voids. Unlike typical impact craters, which are bowl-shaped depressions. These are steep-walled vertical holes that likely formed when the roof of an enormous ancient lava tube collapsed inward. They offer tempting doorways into the protected underworld of the moon, natural sheltered environments that have been safe from radiation and micrometeorites for billions of years. They are like dark, silent portals waiting for future explorers to rappel down into their depths, promising access to a hidden, pristine world beneath the battered exterior. Without an atmosphere to scatter light, there is virtually no gradual, romantic twilight on the moon. Day turns to night with the flip of a cosmic switch. On Earth, we enjoy long, beautiful transitions between light and dark, as our atmosphere bends sunlight around the curve of the planet long after the sun has actually set. On the moon, the moment the final sliver of the sun's brilliant disk slips below the razor-sharp horizon, profound darkness arrives almost instantly, with no lingering glow to ease the transition. It is a world of stark optical absolutes, where the comforting, soft in-between spaces of dawn and dusk simply barely exist, leaving only the binary reality of blinding light or deep, airless night. Some lunar craters are floored with perfectly smooth, frozen lakes of rock that were melted instantly by the incredible heat of an asteroid impact. When a massive object slams into the moon at tens of thousands of miles per hour, the kinetic energy is transformed into a flash of unimaginable heat, liquefying the solid crust in seconds. This impact melt then pools in the bottom of the newly formed bowl, eventually cooling into a flawlessly flat, glassy mirror of dark rock that stands in stark contrast to the rugged crater rims. They are violent moments of cosmic trauma, frozen forever into tranquil, glossy ponds, preserving the exact seconds of their chaotic birth in a silent, solid memory. Robotic landers in the 1960s captured photographs of eerie, glowing streamers of light on the lunar horizon after sunset, a mystery that still fascinates scientists. In a world without air, the sky should be perfectly black immediately after sundown. Yet these surveyor probes detected a faint, ghostly twilight hovering just above the ground. The most widely accepted explanation is that electrostatically levitated lunar dust, floating high above the surface, was catching the very last rays of the sun from beyond the horizon, creating delicate evanescent clouds of light in the vacuum. They are gentle ghosts of illumination that haunt the airless world, fleeting phantoms born from the interaction of dust and distant sunlight. The moon's deep history is divided into grand geologic eras based on cataclysmic events, such as the violent Imbrian period that formed many of the great lava seas. Unlike Earth, where we often mark time by the rise and fall of life forms like dinosaurs or trilobites, lunar time is marked by colossal impacts that reshaped entire hemispheres in a single disastrous day. The scars of these ancient epochs, the Nectarian, the Imbrian, the Eratosthenian, and the Copernican, are still visible on its face today, allowing us to read the moon's biography directly from its battered features. It is a calendar written in scars and stone, stretching back unwaveringly to the violent dawn of our entire solar system. If you were to stand on the moon during its long night, the full Earth hanging in the sky would cast a light roughly 50 times brighter than the full moon casts on Earth. Our planet is larger in diameter and covered in highly reflective white clouds and polar ice caps, making it a brilliant, dazzling beacon in the lunar sky. You could easily read a book by the soft blue light of Earth, and the lunar landscape would be bathed in a strange, cool azure glow. It is a comforting thought that even in the deepest, coldest lunar night, our home world acts as a powerful lighthouse, keeping watch over its smaller companion with a steady, radiant gaze. While the lunar surface itself is absolutely silent, astronauts often remarked on the comforting, womb-like cocoon of sound inside their own helmets, separated from the deadly vacuum by only a few layers of fabric and glass. They were constantly accompanied by the soft mechanical purr of air circulation fans, the rhythmic hum of coolant pumps, and the amplified sound of their own breathing. This tiny, fragile bubble of earthly noise traveled with them through the boundless ocean of extraterrestrial quiet, a constant auditory reminder of the intricate life support machinery that stood between them and the infinite stillness outside. It underscored their profound isolation, emphasizing that they were travelers carrying their own small, noisy atmosphere into a realm where sound had never naturally existed. During the Apollo 17 mission, astronaut Harrison Schmitt was stunned to discover vivid orange soil on the grey moon, a splash of unexpected color in a monochromatic world. This striking material turned out to be composed of countless microscopic beads of orange and black volcanic glass, formed billions of years ago during spectacular fire fountain eruptions. Long before the moon fell silent geologically, these fountains sprayed molten lava high into the vacuum, where the droplets froze instantly into colored glass beads before raining back down onto the surface. They lay buried for eons until a human hand brushed away the grey topsoil, revealing a preserved memory of vibrant, fiery color hidden beneath the cold dust of the present day. The moon's fixed face, forever turned toward Earth, is not a rare anomaly, but the standard fate for most moons in our solar system that orbit relatively close to their parent planets. Gravity is a patient and unending force, slowly draining the rotational energy of smaller bodies until they succumb to the greater mass of their hosts. From Jupiter's icy Europa to Saturn's hazy Titan, nearly every major moon has eventually been pulled into this same synchronized embrace, forced to look forever at the planet that governs its path. It is a universal gesture of gravitational submission, a cosmic hug that, once initiated, lasts for the entire remaining lifetime of the solar system. The United States has left a total of 6 distinct flags on the moon over the course of the Apollo program, though not all of them stand as they once did. When the first astronauts planted their flag, they placed it too close to the lunar module, and it was famously knocked over by the powerful blast of the ascent engine as they lifted off to return home. Subsequent missions learned from this and planted their flags farther away, and images from lunar orbiters suggest that 5 of them still cast thin, spidery shadows on the surface today. Even though their nylon fabric has almost certainly been bleached and weakened by decades of unfiltered sunlight and brutal temperature swings, over very long spans of time, they will gradually crumble into pale fragments in the dust, their colors long since surrendered to the slow, persistent weathering of space. A day on the moon is not just 24 hours like on Earth, but a seemingly endless stretch of over 700 hours. Because it spins so slowly on its axis, it takes roughly 29.5 Earth days for the Sun to return to the same position in the lunar sky, a period known as a synodic day. This means that any future lunar base would have to endure roughly 350 hours of continuous scorching daylight, followed by an equal period of freezing, profound darkness. It is a rhythm of life completely alien to human biology, a cycle of light and dark so elongated that it would require entirely new ways of measuring time and structuring daily existence. Even without a thick atmosphere, there is a tenuous, almost ghostly water cycle happening on the lunar surface right now. when the intense solar wind hits the lunar soil, hydrogen ions from the sun can interact with oxygen atoms already present in the rocks to create tiny amounts of water molecules and hydroxyl. During the blazing heat of the 2-week lunar day, these molecules may be energized enough to hop around the surface, migrating from warmer to cooler regions until they find a permanently shadowed cold trap near the poles, where they freeze and can remain for vast spans of time. It is an incredibly slow molecule-by-molecule migration, a silent, invisible river of water trickling across the dry landscape over millions of years, to eventually gather in the frozen dark. The dust on the moon is so incredibly fine and clinging that it quickly became one of the biggest nuisances for the Apollo astronauts. It coated their pristine white spacesuits in stubborn grey grime, clogged the mechanical joints of their equipment, and even irritated their eyes and lungs once they were back inside the spacecraft. Because there is no wind or water to weather it down, the individual grains are not smooth spheres, but jagged, microscopic hooks that latch onto everything they touch with tenacious electrostatic force. It is a pervasive, inescapable element of the lunar environment, a gritty reminder that we are soft, biological creatures intruding into a harsh realm of sharp, abrasive minerals. Strange, sinuous rills on the moon were once thought to be ancient riverbeds by early astronomers hopeful for signs of life. These winding, snake-like valleys meandering across the flat lunar maria look so much like terrestrial rivers that it was easy to imagine they had once carried water to ancient lunar seas. We now know they are actually collapsed lava tubes or vast channels carved by incredibly hot, fluid lava that flowed billions of years ago like rivers of liquid fire. They stand today as dry, silent canyons, grand monuments to a time when the now quiet moon was geologically alive and bleeding molten rock across its surface. The moon's crust is significantly thicker on its far side than on its near side, a puzzling asymmetry that has intrigued scientists for decades. This uneven outer shell is likely one reason why almost all the dark lunar seas, vast plains of ancient lava, are found primarily on the side facing Earth. The thinner crust there made it easier for magma to punch through to the surface after large impacts. It gives the moon a lopsided internal structure, a geological unevenness that has permanently shaped the two very different faces it presents to the universe. It is a world that is quite literally two-faced, hiding its thicker, more rugged armor on the side that forever faces the unknown dark. Every so often, a small meteorite slams into the moon with enough force to create a bright flash, visible from Earth with the naked eye. These lunar impact flashes are fleeting, silent explosions that release as much energy as tons of TNT, instantly vaporizing rock and creating a brand new crater in a fraction of a second. For centuries, astronomers reported seeing strange, momentary sparks on the dark portion of a crescent moon, and modern cameras have now confirmed that many of these are real-time cosmic collisions. They are stark reminders that the solar system is still a dynamic, occasionally violent shooting gallery, and that our silent companion is constantly taking hits in the ongoing story of space. Future lunar explorers might one day live inside vast natural caves that have already been waiting for them for billions of years. The discovery of large pits on the lunar surface that open up into immense, cavernous underground voids has revolutionized ideas for future moon bases. These natural shelters would provide ready-made protection from intense radiation, extreme temperature swings, and micrometeorite rain, without needing to build heavy structures from scratch. They are silent, empty cathedrals of rock, sculpted by ancient volcanism and left undisturbed for eons, perhaps destined to become the very first secure homes for humanity on another world. The simple act of walking on the moon is surprisingly difficult, forcing astronauts to adopt a strange, loping gait, often called the lunar hop, because gravity is only 1/6 as strong as Earth's. Normal walking mechanics don't work well. A regular step tends to launch you too high into the air, wasting energy and making you unstable. Astronauts quickly discovered that hopping from one foot to the other, like a slow-motion kangaroo, was the most efficient way to travel across the dusty surface. It is a unique form of human locomotion, born entirely from the alien physics of a smaller world, a delightful, buoyant dance that every future lunar traveler will have to learn. Despite appearing brilliant in our night sky, the moon is actually quite dark by astronomical standards, with a reflectivity lower than many icy moons and planets. Its surface has an average albedo similar to that of worn asphalt, meaning it absorbs nearly 90% of the sunlight that hits it. We perceive it as dazzlingly bright because our eyes adjust to the profound darkness of the surrounding night sky, making even a dark grey rock seem like a glowing beacon by contrast. It is a grand celestial optical illusion, a humble, dusty world masquerading as a luminous jewel thanks to the deep velvet backdrop of space. The moon is slowly dampening Earth's wobble over millions of years, acting like a steadying hand on a spinning top. While it stabilizes our axial tilt, its gravitational interactions also slowly steal rotational energy from Earth, causing our planet's spin to very gradually slow down. This means that in the distant geologic past, a day on Earth was significantly shorter, perhaps only 18 or 20 hours long during certain ancient eras. We are slowly losing mere milliseconds of our day every century, a virtually imperceptible deceleration that, over deep time, profoundly alters the very rhythm of our planet's life. There are ancient, ghost-like craters on the moon that have been almost completely buried by later lava flows, leaving only faint circular outlines on the smooth plains. These ghost craters are the husks of once grand impact sites that were flooded by molten basalt billions of years ago, submerging their floors and leaving only their highest rim peaks poking above the hardened lava sea. They look like pale, ethereal ripples frozen in the dark rock, silent memories of a violent past that have been nearly erased by the slow geologic processes of a once active moon. They are haunting reminders that even on a seemingly frozen world, history can be buried, waiting for a keen eye to trace its faint, submerged outlines. Some scientists believe that microscopic terrestrial life might, in principle, have hitched a ride to the moon billions of years ago on rocks blasted off Earth by giant asteroid impacts. It is theoretically possible that tough, spore-forming bacteria could have survived the violent journey through space inside a protective meteorite and landed on the ancient lunar surface. While they almost certainly would not have survived for long in such a harsh environment, their fossilized remains might still be preserved in the dust, making them the very first Earthborn travelers to reach another world. This idea remains speculative, and researchers are still exploring how likely such journeys and survivals might truly have been. The dust on the moon is so electrostatically charged that it can sometimes levitate purely on its own, defying the weak lunar gravity. The relentless bombardment of solar radiation knocks electrons off the dust grains on the day side, building up a strong positive charge that causes them to repel each other like tiny magnets. This invisible force can be strong enough to lift microscopic grains off the surface, creating a tenuous, floating layer of dust that hovers just above the ground before settling back down elsewhere. It is a strange, alien form of weather, driven not by wind or heat, but by raw electricity and sunlight interacting in a vacuum. Because the moon has no atmosphere to trap heat, its surface cools down incredibly quickly the moment sunlight is removed. During a total lunar eclipse, when Earth's shadow sweeps across the moon, surface temperatures can plummet by hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit in just a few hours. This rapid thermal shock can actually cause rocks on the surface to crack and crumble under the sudden stress, a phenomenon that may be one of the few active erosional processes still happening there today. It is a world that lives on the thermal edge, constantly swinging between the extremes of a blast furnace and deep cryogenic freeze with every passing shadow. The Apollo astronauts left behind special scientific packages called ALSEP that continued to beam data back to Earth for years after they departed. These automated stations, powered by small nuclear generators, faithfully recorded moonquakes, meteorite impacts, and the properties of the solar wind, long after the human footprints around them had gone cold. They were among humanity's first long-term robotic outposts, silent sentinels that kept watch in the lonely darkness until budget cuts and mission endings back on Earth eventually brought their operations to a close. They still sit there today, perfectly preserved museums of 1970s technology, waiting silently in the dust for someone to perhaps one day come and examine them again. If you could see the moon's gravity with your eyes, it would look lumpy and uneven rather than a perfect smooth sphere. Because of massive, dense concentrations of material hidden beneath its large seas, its gravitational field is filled with subtle highs and lows that can tug spacecraft into unstable orbits. These mascons act like hidden weights that make orbiting the moon a surprisingly tricky navigational challenge, requiring constant small adjustments to avoid drifting off course. It is a celestial body that is deceptively complex, even in its invisible forces, a lumpy, uneven world, masquerading as a perfect sphere of silver light. The moon's shadow during a solar eclipse races across Earth's surface at incredible supersonic speeds, often exceeding 1,500 miles per hour. To keep up with the deepest part of the shadow, totality, you would need to fly in one of humanity's fastest jets, chasing the fleeting darkness as it rushes over continents and oceans. It is a staggering display of orbital mechanics in action, a massive shadow cast by a celestial rock that turns day into night for just a few precious minutes before racing onward. It is a reminder of the immense velocities at which our entire cosmic neighborhood is constantly spinning and moving through the void. There is a striking philosophical concept called the overview effect, often reported by astronauts who have seen the Earth from the vantage point of space, and especially from the distance of the moon. Seeing our entire planet as a tiny, fragile blue marble hanging alone in the overwhelming black void often triggers a profound cognitive shift, creating an intense feeling of global interconnectedness and a desire to protect our only home. From the desolate, grey vantage point of the moon, national borders vanish, political squabbles seem insignificant, and the utter vulnerability of life becomes deeply clear. It is perhaps the moon's greatest final gift to humanity, a mirror that does not just reflect sunlight, but reflects our own true place in the cosmos back to us, with humbling, breathtaking clarity. And so, our journey through the silent, silver world of the moon comes to a gentle close. We have walked in imagination across its dusty plains, traced the scars of ancient impacts, and listened for the faint tremors and quiet histories written into its stone. We have watched its patient orbit tug at our oceans, shape our nights, and cradle the first tentative steps of our species out into the wider universe. In the moon's distant, unblinking gaze, we find both a record of unimaginable violence and a profound, reassuring steadiness, a companion that has witnessed every chapter of life on Earth without ever speaking a word. It is a small world, but one that holds a vastness of memory, of fire and ice, of light and shadow, of stories whispered from one generation to the next beneath its soft glow. As we leave it for now, it remains above us as it always has, constant, gentle, and quietly waiting for the next pair of eyes to look up and wonder. If you happen to still be awake, that's perfectly all right. You can simply lie back, let the music keep flowing in the background, and drift in and out of the story at your own pace. But if your eyes are heavy, let the stories of the moon and the gentle music carry you softly into rest. Sleep well. Good night.